When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Psychic. User: See No Evil 333. Posted November 13th, 1996.
They called me because they didn't know what else to do. That's how it usually goes. I don't get calls when things are easy. I get calls when a case has gone cold. When parents start crying at town halls, when the press keeps running the same photograph over and over until people stop looking at it. That's when someone in the department gets desperate enough to remember me, and I get a knock at my door. This one came out of Jackson. Missing girl, 17 years old, last seen leaving her shift at a sandwich shop on the bypass. The cops had nothing. No witnesses, no car cited, no leads at all. They'd been sitting on their hands for 3 weeks, and the mother wouldn't stop showing up at the station demanding answers. Finally, Detective Raines gave me a call. "You still doing that sight thing?" he asked. The words tasted sour. "Yeah," I said. "I still see." He told me to meet him at the scene. Midnight. It'll be quieter then. The sandwich shop was already closed when I pulled up. One of those sad strip mall places with faded signs and a busted ice machine out front. A sodium lamp buzzed above the entrance, painting everything a sick shade of orange. The parking lot was empty, except for 2 cruisers. Raines was leaning against his, arms crossed, chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping him awake. "Thanks for coming," he said. Didn't sound thankful, sounded like he wanted this over with. "We don't tell people we're using you, you understand that?" "I've done this before," I said. He nodded and gestured toward the dark windows. "She locked up at 10 and never made it to her car. You need to go inside?" I shook my head. "Nah, just give me something of hers." He pulled a plastic bag from his coat pocket, and inside was a hairbrush, pink with a cracked handle. A few strands still tangled in the bristles. I took it carefully, held it between my palms, and closed my eyes. The air shifted. That's how it always starts. Pressure builds in my temples, then drops behind my eyes like a film reel starting. Colors smear, then sharpen. Smells come first. Damp earth, rust, wet cloth. Then sound. Breathing, muffled. A heartbeat, not my own, and then, finally, sight. I saw the girl, cramped in a dark space, breathing hard, hands clawing at wood above her, dirt spilling in around her sides. She was underground, alive, but barely. My throat tightened and I opened my eyes, gasping. "She's buried," I said, "somewhere shallow in the woods." Rain's jaw worked. "Alive? For now." He straightened. "Where?" I shook my head. I can't see the place. Not yet. I just know she's close. He didn't like that answer, but he didn't have another option. Tomorrow night, he said, we'll drive. We went out the next evening, me riding in the back of his cruiser like a suspect. The roads bled out of town into black fields and pine breaks, telephone poles ticking by like the hands of a clock. I closed my eyes again, pressed the hairbrush to my forehead, and waited. Images came in flashes. A rusted sign, gravel crunching under tires, a tree with a lightning scar down the middle. I told him to keep driving, turn here, slow down there. It went on for miles until the woods swallowed us. Finally, I told him to stop. We stepped out into the night. It smelled like wet leaves and gasoline. Crickets rasped. My stomach turned over as I looked toward a clearing ahead. "She's there," I whispered. "We have to dig." Rains called it in. Within half an hour, floodlights snapped on and men with shovels went to work. Dirt flew, sweat glistening on their necks. The mother had shown up somehow, standing behind the tape, clutching a handkerchief like it was all she had left. I stayed back, shaking, waiting for the sound I dreaded most. The shovel hit wood. The men froze, then dug faster. A small box emerged from the earth, handmade, nailed shut, damp with soil. My heart pounded, and they pried the lid loose. A cry went up. Inside was the girl, curled up, eyes wide. But her skin was pale, her lips blue. She wasn't breathing. "Too late," one of the officers muttered. But when they touched her wrist, her skin was still warm. They said she'd been dead no more than an hour. But that made no sense. She'd been missing for 3 weeks. I'd seen her alive. She was alive when I told them where to dig. The coroner couldn't explain it, just shook his head and scribbled notes. The mother wailed and cursed the ground. Rains didn't look at me until the body was zipped up and carried away. When he finally did, it wasn't gratitude in his eyes. It was suspicion. "You said she was alive," he said flatly. "She was," I whispered. "I swear to God she was." But I knew even then something was wrong. The timeline didn't fit. Unless my sight wasn't pulling me forward, unless it was pulling her to me, unless she hadn't been buried until the moment I spoke it aloud. The thought made me sick. I left before they finished. 2 weeks passed. I tried to forget. Tried to drown the memory in cheap bourbon and late-night static on the TV, but the call came again. Different case, different town. A boy missing this time. 12 years old, vanished from his backyard. I told myself not to go. Told myself it wasn't my problem, but I went anyway. I always go. They gave me his baseball cap. Faded blue, sweat-stained. I held it in my hands and closed my eyes. Smells. Pine sap, oil, sound of running water, then sight. The boy was sitting in a chair, wrists bound. His eyes darted back and forth, tears streaking down his face. A shadow moved behind him, then a voice, low and sharp, cutting through me. "You brought them." I snapped awake, chest heaving. My hands shook so bad I dropped the cap. The detectives leaned forward. "Well?" one of them asked. "Where is he?" I couldn't answer. Not truthfully, but my mouth betrayed me anyway. "In the woods, by water, near an old mill." They moved fast. Cars, radios, men with flashlights. We tore down back roads until I recognized the place from my vision. They ran ahead, weapons drawn. I stayed back, cold dread sinking into my guts. Minutes later, a shout. Found him. Relief flooded me for a second, but it died when they carried the boy out. He was dead. Still warm, but dead. Just like the girl. After that, I stopped taking calls. Didn't matter. They came anyway. Word spreads in small towns. Mothers desperate for answers, cops out of leads, pastors whispering about miracles. They all came knocking, begging me to help, and every time I tried, it ended the same. I'd see the victim alive, trapped and waiting. I'd give the police a location. They'd find them, always exactly where I said, and always dead. Still warm, but dead. I started keeping notes, trying to make sense of it. Times, dates, places. I compared them against when I spoke, when I described the visions. The pattern was too sharp to ignore. The victims weren't killed when they were taken. They weren't killed until I saw them, until I said it out loud. It wasn't sight, it was a sentence. The worst one was in Yazoo County. Farmer's daughter, 9 years old. Her father begged me on his knees outside my door. I told him no. I told him I couldn't help anymore, that all I brought was death, but he didn't believe me. No one ever does. He pressed her ribbon into my hand and walked away. That night, I dreamed of her. I didn't even touch the ribbon. It didn't need to. I saw her in a basement somewhere, crying, holding a stuffed bear. I tried not to speak, tried to hold it in, but I woke up screaming her name. They found her the next morning, fresh in the ground, soil still loose. I can't explain it. I don't know what force I'm tied to, what kind of cruel channel I've become. Maybe I'm not psychic at all. Maybe I'm just a mouthpiece for something that likes watching, something that feeds on despair and wanted a willing partner. The police stopped calling eventually. Too many questions, too much bad press. But the parents, they still come. They always come, and I always tell them no. But sometimes at night, when the house is quiet and the wind rattles the glass, I see their faces anyway. The missing, the lost. They crowd behind my eyelids, begging, whispering, waiting for me to give them shape. And I know if I open my mouth, if I let even one word slip, the ground somewhere will open and close again. So I keep silent. Drink, I smoke until my lungs ache. I try to bury myself deeper than they ever were, but the visions don't stop, and sometimes I wonder how long it will be before I dream of my own face. Pale, wide-eyed, still warm, waiting for the shovel.
Subject, Golden. User, P78 Risk. Posted, November 12, 1998.
When the Our brothers decided to turn Schuetzen Park into a strip mall back in 1955, I suspect you could count the number of people in the Rochester area who were happy about it on a single hand. The Ours had owned it for generations, so You couldn't argue they didn't have the right to do with it as they pleased. It was just a shame to see such a lovely piece of land get bulldozed for something so crass as a shopping plaza. For the previous 4 years, the 22nd Ward Republican Club, of which I was a member, had held their annual picnic in Schuetzen Park, and so we put in a request to be the park's final booking in August of that year. 1955 was a year of change for me, some of which I saw coming. Finishing college had always been part of the plan, as had finding some kind of job, which turned out to be working as a teller for the new Arundequoit office of Lincoln Rochester Trust Company. The job then allowed me to rent a modest room in Margaret Killjoy's rooming house on North Street, completing the 3 things I had set out to accomplish that summer. Meeting Diane at the Republic Club picnic was one of the things I hadn't planned on, nor was falling deeply and irretrievably in love with her. I courted her through the fall and winter of that year, sharing 35-cent banana splits at the soda fountain in back of Bryan Drug House, chilly walks around Arundequoit Bay, and her favorite ice skating on Cranberry Pond. She was a vision on that ice, as graceful in her skates as anyone walking a runway in Milan or Paris. As long as I live, I'll never forget the way her golden scarf whipped through the air as she twirled. We married the following summer, not in Schuetzen Park, sadly, and moved into a small house off Cooper Road near the old firehouse. It is a fact of life that love changes after marriage, but so long as you remember to keep honoring and serving that love, the change doesn't have to be negative. We raised 2 fine boys, Errol and Henry, in that house, and made sure that the love we showered them with didn't stop us from still showing love to one another. Diane and I would take time to have dinner together outside the house, and during the winter, take a few hours every month to skate together on Cranberry Pond. We brought the boys there many times, of course, but it was important for us to carve out those hours alone together. The things you nourish will be the things which grow, so be careful where you water, is what my old Irish grandmother used to say, and it was sage advice, allowing our marriage to grow and evolve once the boys moved away to college, a time when many of the couples we knew were descending into self-medicated misery. That first fall on our own again, we took so many walks around the bay, her hand in mine. We both got blisters on our feet. It hardly mattered, and when the mercury dropped far enough to freeze the ice on Cranberry Pond, you better believe we were out there every Saturday. Of the 2 of us, she was just better, more beautiful, more intelligent, stronger in every way. I was in awe of her. To love her was to be in a state of grace, which was both a blessing and a curse, because grace is timeless, but men and women are not. She collapsed on the ice 7 years ago, in 1992, a snapped ankle. Her doctor said it was just osteoporosis, a thinning of the bones that comes with age, and she should start taking calcium supplements. I watched her hobble around on crutches for the better part of 2 months, the ankle refusing to mend in the slightest, until I demanded a second opinion. Bone cancer was the verdict. Aggressive. She suffered more than anyone should ever have to, and we buried her in Arundequoit Cemetery less than 18 months later. Toward the end, a brutal combination of pain and then pain medication largely left her in a nonverbal haze. On the days when those 2 things balanced each other out long enough for her to be lucid, it was like a cloud lifted. The final time she came to, she made me promise her something. Once she was gone, I had to keep skating. Not every Saturday, but at least once a season. Do that, she said, and come what may, I will find my way back to you. She was gone within hours. That first winter, I simply couldn't bring myself to go to Cranberry Pond without her. At one point, I made it as far as the car, my skates slung over my shoulder. I put the key in the ignition, depressed the brake, and then sat there watching snowflakes drift across the windshield until the sun dipped below the horizon. Defeated, I went back inside the house, leaving my skates in the trunk. They were still there the following December. In fact, I remembered only when I was on my way back from a long, lonely drive along the Lake Ontario Parkway. It was late in the day, almost too late to enjoy any real time on the ice, and yet, when the exit for the pond came up, my hand moved the turn signal before my brain had a chance to catch up. The parking lot was empty, so when the tears came while I was lacing up on one of the logs next to the water, I just let it happen. I hadn't dressed for the weather, so that first year I only spent a few minutes on the ice. In the years since, though, I've come prepared and stayed until the sun was long gone. Why so long, you might ask? Because that's when it happens. As the shadows lengthen into full dark, if you know exactly where to look, you can see the ends of a golden scarf whipping through the air.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.